royal family. This is Zion Jones with Rock Life with Zion. I have a special guest tonight. As you can see, Richard Franklin is in the house. In the house. Of course, he has so many great things that he has done for photography. He's also done a lot of great things. Religion. He's also touched in different bases with children. I just would like for him to tell a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from England, and I've lived in America since 1980. My family emigrated, and we found a lot of opportunities here in America that we didn't find back in Europe, so we never regretted coming. But I've had an interesting journey. I lived in Miami, I lived in New York, I used to be an investment banker, and then I moved to LA with a girlfriend back in 1990 and really decided to give up normal business in order to do artistic things, because I just felt that things that I'd been doing, which mostly involved business, were just not satisfying my soul, and I had a part of me that wanted to do creative things. So I've done a lot of things in a lot of different fields to just express interests that I had in a creative way.
So actually you came from London, then you came to America here, and you did investment banking. Okay, and how long did you do that for?
Well, my father was a very interesting player on Wall Street in the 1980s, and it was a period where he was very welcomed in America. We found that, you know, doors opened immediately. People liked the English. It's a very kind country. And he saw a lot of opportunities about restructuring big American corporations that had got, that were inefficient, and did very nicely, and then moved and retired to the Caribbean.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, so they've lived there. So part of me is English, part of me is, you know, lives in LA, and part of me is also Caribbean, because my parents are now citizens of Antigua in the Caribbean, so that's another part of my life. I spend a lot of time there.
Yeah. Well, what I love about it is, as I was speaking to him, he came along, he did investment banking, and then after that, you went and perfected that. So it's like you had a lot of gifts wrapped up inside that, okay, I'm finished with that. And what was your next stage if you did?
Well, I wouldn't say I perfected it. I actually wasn't very good at it.
Oh, really?
But I didn't enjoy it, so I gave it up.
Okay.
My brother is very good at it, and so hats off to my brother, but it wasn't my field. But it takes time in life for people to find their calling, and it happened to me quite late in life. I had things that I embraced in terms of creative things I'd never done before, because I didn't have an outlet, or I didn't think that they were possible, or you know, you have to have dreams. I came to LA, which is the city of dreams, where I did interesting things, and they just kept on changing. I produced plays, I've done big educational programs, I got into photography, I was a music manager. You know, in LA, in another town, if you don't have a job, they say you're unemployed. In LA, you're just between projects.
Right.
So there's no such thing as being unemployed.
Right.
So you just, nobody will really say to you, you know, label you that you're unemployed. They'll say, oh, you're working on a new thing, you're on a new script, on a new development, on a new, whatever it is. And I like that in this town. There's no rules. You can create your own reality.
And I love you said that too, because what's important, you said you didn't like investment banking.
No.
So you took that jump. You was like, you know what, I got to do something I love. Because that's what I always tell my audience. If you're not happy in what you're doing, you're not living. So you came out here, you started living, and what was the first thing that you jumped into with all this creative talent you have?
I was interested in, actually, in something that was the last thing that anybody would expect that I'd be interested in or become well known in, which was, believe it or not, the field of teaching morals and values to children. I think I came to a view back in 1989 in New York that America has a massive values problem. It's a country that's completely out of balance. People here, you can't have a good life if you don't have a philosophy of life, and you can't have a philosophy of life unless you have knowledge of the outside world, and of culture, and of literature, and of standards. And something has happened in America in which this country doesn't live up to its potential because it's a very lost country. Now, it's partly lost because people are, in a sense, out of balance, in the sense, perhaps, that there's nothing wrong with television, there's nothing wrong with music, but if you spend an excessive amount of time watching it, an excessive amount of time listening to things, it's at the expense of other things that you could be doing. So I think this is a nation of people who are watching other people's lives and not concentrating on their own. And I decided I didn't want to be any part of that.
Right. And I agree, because that's why I don't have a television.
I think it's a good idea. It's become a very polarized country. It's a miserable experience watching politics, for example, on television, because everybody's quarreling.
Right.
And I think it's very sad. America is a great country, but it lives miles below, I think, its potential for things. You know, it's got a very troubled past. It's a country, from the perspective of me as an Englishman, it's a very new country. I think that the founding of the country is to this day, is very troubling to people, because I think it was founded by people that it's very hard to look up to if they at the same time were slave owners. And I think therefore it's a country that's, in a sense, founded on people who were bad people and hypocrites. You can't talk about freedom and justice and everybody's equal and at the same time have slaves. I think it's incompatible. And for example, I just read a book on George Washington, and you know, this is a person that you would think, you know, this country looks up to, but they shouldn't. He was a man who hunted down a slave called Una Judge, who was 20 years old, who ran away when he was president. And he hunted her down, and in hunting her down, he broke every single law he possibly could, because he didn't want anybody to know that he was hunting her down. And he was a monster. And I think it's very hard. These things are important to me. I think that the country's got to wake up to the fact that it's been founded by bad people. And I think this whole debate they had recently about Confederate statues is part of that debate. I'm a bit of a radical guy. I would go further. I'd knock down the Confederate statues. I'd also knock down all the Founding Fathers statues.
And I would knock them down with...
Thank you. We'll do it together. We'll be anarchists together. But I've obviously got strong views, and I'm passionate, and you know, I can happily ramble on about superficial things, but the truth is, you know, I like to mix my life with the superficial things, but also the very serious things, and the very serious things at the end of the day are probably more interesting to me.
Right, right, and which is the root of things, and that's why I believe in people helping people, coming out from the system. The things, like you said, doesn't have a good root, and that's why the world is the way it is. Where are the morals? The televisions, every time you turn it on, it's something negative, it's drama. Where do we get this positive notion? You said you also did some education with young children.
Well, no, I actually headed the largest program designed to put character education as the #1 thing in the curriculum of the American school system. And the reason for that, it sounds ridiculous and radical, but it shouldn't be. If you ask the Greeks, who invented what we consider, if you like, the way our system of education, if you ask them what's the most important thing what's the purpose of education, they would say, well, it's obvious, to create moral citizens. If you asked any Secretary of Education in America today, what's the purpose of education, they would ramble on about, well, in this competitive environment where the Chinese are rising and we have to compete, so they wouldn't, the last thing they'd talk about would be that. I think the first thing we should talk about is that if you can't create good citizens, your country's going to go nowhere. Exactly. It's going down because of that. For example, our president is one of the most vulgar, crass men in the world, but he's a reflection of us. He's not an aberration. He's not an accident. He's a reflection of a country that's lost its collective mind about values and standards. And knowing the things that he says and the things that he's done, they'd still vote him in. And he understands that very well. He understands that everybody will forget anything he says in a matter of a couple of days because everybody's attention span has collapsed.
So how do you think we get back to really being a country that had morals? I mean, really coming together as a body of one, transforming this negative to a positive? Well,
a couple of things could do it. One is a war, believe it or not. If people remember at the time when we did invade Iraq, the whole country became united. Strange things that wars do, they tend to unite countries. We might be facing an existential crisis that's been kicked down the road for the last 30 years, which is that you've got rogue nuclear states that mean harm to us, and we cannot take the risk of that they may be bluffing. And so one possibility is that we're going to have a real terrible nuclear exchange with Korea. I think that's not impossible. I actually think it's quite probable, actually. And that may change the entire axis of the way we think about ourselves in the world, because the danger would be so great that they will dwarf everything else that we have. In terms of changing people generally, I think America should have character education in the schools. You deal in a country where In some cases, 80% of children are growing up in single-parent families. There's no father. People don't know, the mother is working maybe 2 jobs. The children are watching too much TV, too much junk. And the people, by the way, in Hollywood, where I live, know this. And they give people the junk, knowing that people will take the junk. And they want to pay for the junk. And they love the junk. And, it's very hard to get people to be serious about quality. But at the end of the day, it'll come back and bite you.
Oh, definitely. So, and it's like you have wheat and tares. It's like you have to separate. You have to have the good and all the body of good to come together to transform whatever they can to be that light. You understand?
Well, I think, as I say, I can't, perhaps all one can do, forget the big picture about whether a war might change us. The other side of the coin is that everybody, as an individual, has to do their very best to just save one life at a time. I've often met people with very grandiose statements about I'm going to heal the world and I'm going to make everybody better and look after everybody. I think these are stupid statements. I think there's a nice Jewish saying that I like: to save a life is to save the world. And I'm happy with that.
Right.
One person, if you can do just one thing with one person, you're okay.
One person, that's what the love movement is, transforming one life at a time. So if you can do that for a day, if you can change someone's life.
Well, I do it personally for much more than a day. I've spent years, there are a number of people I care about very much just because I choose to care. They're not my blood, they're just my people, the friends that I like, and that's a very big, active, meaningful part of my life. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so did that, with your education and helping the children and having those morals, did that also go into the religion? Tell us a little bit about that. Well, I like to take on things that were a challenge. I did probably one of the most serious bodies of work done in trying to put moral values into the American school system. And then I thought, well, let's have a go at the next challenge. Let's take on religion. And so I produced probably the strongest play on religion of our time. It was called The Disputation. And it was the recreation of the most famous trial that ever happened in history between Judaism and Christianity. It happened in 1263 in Barcelona, when the two religions had a debate for about 5 days that was forced on both sides by the Vatican and moderated by a very interesting king who gave both sides, he was interested in all the arguments. And so I recreated that on stage because I thought that it was something that, if we have to learn that some religions maybe are, not only may have a terrible history, but they may actually be bad for us. I think that, I'm not a religious person. I think you can take a good quote and a good thought from anywhere. It can be from a New or Old Testament, it can be from Shakespeare, it doesn't really matter. But I am not a religious person, and I tend to think that it's done more harm than good. And I wanted to make a big play about religion, so it gave me a platform to speak about these things, which I did. I've lectured at synagogues and seminaries, and on values, I've lectured at universities. It just was fun things to do that I otherwise didn't get to do. I was just interested to participate, if you like, in the debate of things that I thought were meaningful about the world we live in. And religion plays a part, and it's part of politics plays a part. I'm interested in that, and education. How do you get good people? Where does character come from? Have some religions, in fact, hurt us? Do they stop us thinking? Do they make us mentally lazy? Do they, in fact, have lousy morals? And that interests me. Right. And when you
I probably shouldn't give you my real conclusions, but they're strong.
Well, to me, even religion has it divides. I think religion is a man-made quality or man-made entity, I should say, and it is made to divide us. So you have this religion over there, this religion over there, instead of just really working with the inner person to become a better person.
I don't know if the intention was to divide people, but I would say this about some religions, that I hate the word truth. I don't like that word, because it should be something that we would all aspire to. It's a beautiful word in a sense, but anybody who tells you they know the truth is telling you in a sense that they know the truth and you don't. And they will use that. And so every religion that says they have the monopoly of the truth, I am suspicious of. And anybody who claims to be spiritual, I run a mile from. Because a spiritual person wouldn't claim to be spiritual.
They'll just be.
They'll just be. And I think that, so when people say to me, I know the truth, it's always been used throughout history as, you know, I have some monopoly of knowledge that you don't have that's so sacred and important that you're a lesser person because you don't have it. So I think in that sense it's very dangerous. So I prefer that we don't use that word, or we use it very carefully.
And I agree. I believe that we should just be. You know, if we are love and we're exuding love, it should be in our character, it should be in our examples, it should be in our reactions and actions. So I definitely agree with you on that. So
we find what's there we disagree on. I mean, this is too easy. Make it hard.
But I do it. I mean, definitely, like I said, I really believe like politics, religion, all these different entities, I call it the system, are created to divide the people and not bring them together.
Well, when I did my values program, people would say to me, well, you can't deal with, you know, what are you going to say about politics, religion, and sex, which are very major issues? And I'd say, well, I'm not going to say anything about them. Those are what I call subjective issues. Everybody can have their own view in those areas, and I wouldn't touch it. But what I think happens in America is you get neutralized from anything by people saying, you can't talk about politics, religion, and sex. I'm interested in all of those areas that despite all of our differences of color, religion, whatever, that we all actually do agree on, which is who's in favor of theft, who's in favor of low self-esteem, cheating, lying, rudeness, destroying the environment, who's in favor of any of that? Nobody. So I think what happens is that all the good things that we could teach get, in a sense, neutralized by the people who have an agenda on religion and politics, who say you can't do that because it's, you know, because, you know, you're intruding on values that, you know, should have religion in them. And you even watch it, it retards education. So, for example, you get fundamentalists to say you can't teach evolution in the schools. I mean, I think this is crazy stuff, because I think evolution is a fact. And anybody who doesn't think it's a fact is silly. They just don't know any better. But you shouldn't teach people that there's some alternative out there, I think, that's equal, that should be taught in the science classroom. I think that should not be in the science classroom, because it's all, we know evolution to be a fact, and everything else is speculation.
Yeah, they say evolution is a fact, but we know it's scientific, and it's on theory.
Well, but theory in science actually means different things than what it means out of science. To a scientist, you have the theory of gravity. Nobody denies gravity. It is a fact. But it's still called a theory. Evolution in biology is a fact. But it's called a theory. That's just the way scientists refer to things. But they use it in a different word in a different way from what perhaps we think of as non-scientists. But to scientists, it's a fact. But you always get fringe people, even in science, you know, who will tell you it isn't. But they're fringe. They're so fringe that they're not serious. But if you want to find people, for example, who will say the world is flat, as a rapper I understand out there right now, busy trying to show that, you know, this is nonsense. You know, but you'll always have people who will say nonsense.
Right.
But you mustn't have children neutralized by the marginal few that talk nonsense.
So where do you think we find the root of this? Because, like, you know, everything comes from something. Like you have scientists that say certain things, and you got a theory, and then you got those who say this truth, and then you have this religion. Because everything is read from a book, right?
Well, what I like about science as opposed to religion is science, in a sense, is always modifying positions based on evidence. Religion doesn't modify any of its positions based on any evidence because it doesn't think evidence is important, because faith is belief without evidence. I'm only interested in things with evidence.
Well, you don't think that anything religion has what we call evidence? Because there are some things in religion that's evidence. Even with some of the scientific things, they actually took some of those truths, or what you say, you don't like the word truth, they actually took some of those things, or most of the things came from the truth versus scientists, right?
I probably disagree on that. I think that, you know, the Bible we do, and I think the Bible is just our earliest rudimentary, primitive attempt to try and explain the world around us, and nowadays we know better. And I think that we should grow out of being respectful to books written by Bronze Age peasants.
Right. And it's funny you said that, because every book, everything is a book. Even the scientists wrote it.
Right. Well, here's the silly thing about religion, because here's how I think it really works. What does divide up the world, that I agree with you, is it's amazing but there are thousands of religions, and every one of them claims that the creator of heaven and earth has written a book specially for them. And the only one thing that's common about all of these books is that every one of those books says anybody who doesn't believe that particular book is a bad, blaspheming person who doesn't know any better and is bad. That's what divides us all up. Everybody's claiming a different book.
Right.
And they obviously can't all be right, and I happen to think that none of them are right about, much anyway. So, but I find it a nonsense that we've all got these different books, which we're all taking far too seriously.
But isn't that interesting when you say that? That everyone says, look at these books. It's my book, or it's my religion. Everyone's, and to me, I see so much division. Like, it's there, because if you really, because you've done religion, you studied it, do you notice that in every religion, you will get some of the truth, some of it's repetitive, like, there's some truth in every religion, but I believe culture, some people's culture and information was added to that to bring on the division that we have today.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I find it, I think religion cannot be taken seriously because it's just an accident of birth. If you were born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be talking to me now about Allah and the Prophet Muhammad, and you'd be taking that completely seriously. And if you were born in India, you'd be telling me about whatever God's there. And I think that when something's just an accident of birth, I think it becomes a sort of, can't be taken too seriously because it's just an accident. If you happen to be born in America, you're probably going to be a Protestant or a Catholic just because of the accident of birth of where you are. That's how do you take things seriously? But I'll tell you another thing though about that I do think about religion. I think that one thing we should perhaps make a mistake, and Richard Dawkins was a very famous biologist, and he's also a famous atheist. He regards the teaching of religion at a very early age as almost child abuse. And I think he has a point. It sounds very aggressive, it sounds harsh, but he says this, he says, look, we all accept that, in every society, despite all our differences, there's a certain age before which it's not permissible to have sex, or permissible to drink, or permissible to drive a car, or permissible to vote. But when it comes to something that's really important in the way you think and how you see the world, you're told it from the age of 3. And anybody who knows anything about science knows that if you tell a child anything at 3, they won't get it out of their head. Because everybody knows that children are completely suggestible, and once you've set these very strong visual images into their head, they can't get it out of their head. I think it's very hard to overcome the teachings that you have at 4 or 5 by people who are determined to tell you these stories, and hang on to those stories only because of the accident of birth or where they happen to come from.
Right. And really, when we are living our own story and really finding the true purpose of why we're here and how we got here, is very important, because like you said, by all these different religions, just like all these different languages that we have, I don't know if you know about the Babylon, when the actually different languages came and everyone went to their own land, and that's where the Hinduism, Buddhism, and all these different religions came. And that's where people can't find the truth today, because they're looking, it's like, okay, it's my God over here, no, it's my God over here. But really, even if it was that, where's the true love? Like you said, where's the morals? It doesn't even matter what religion you're in, you're still not living a love life. Because that has to be the root of really transforming the world to make it a better world.
Well, I've come to the conclusion late in life that the one place in life where you shouldn't get your morals from is the Bible. I mean, I'm Jewish. I'm very proud of being Jewish in certain respects. But, I think the Old Testament condones slavery. I think it's very clear. It says that you should kill the adulterer, you should kill the homosexual, you should kill disobedient children, you should kill people who try to convert you, you should kill people who convert, you should kill people who gather the sticks and violate the Sabbath. I think this is barbaric stuff. So I don't take it seriously. I think you can take a good story, and it's fun to have good stories, but they're all charming, interesting folklore stories, but I don't take it more seriously than that.
Yeah, and it's funny you said like the Old Testament is about kill, and that was the judgment. I think the New Testament talks about love.
No, I don't think it does. I think the New Testament in some respects is worse because it introduces hell, which does not exist in the Old Testament. The word heaven, interestingly enough, is mentioned only twice in the entire Old Testament. If you read the Quran, it is mentioned more on every single page of the Quran than in the entire Old Testament, where it's mentioned just twice. Now that may explain why no Jew's ever strapped a bomb to himself to blow anybody up, and why Arabs do it with a smile on their face. Because they believe the next world is better than this. And I think it's very dangerous religion, because it will put into people ideas of non-reality that have a profound effect on all of us. And so on the New Testament, no, I don't say it's a book about love. I think that superficially one can think that it is, but ultimately, no, I think it does more harm than good. I think that I'm interested in not what a religion says. I'm interested in what's happened under the name of that religion, and I presume you're a black woman, right? I don't know what all your heritage or of your from where?
I'm Hebrew.
Hebrew woman. Well, anyway, you're a dark woman. I'll tell you this, and it may be strong stuff to people, but I think that how do you, if you want to say that, for example, the New Testament's good, I would say to you that America has not yet faced the fact that slavery is entirely a product of Christianity. The slave, you have to know your history. That this country was founded by religious Puritans fleeing England after the death of Oliver Cromwell, because they were persecuted by other Christians, and they come to a country and you would think that they would live with the highest standards, but what do? They kill the local population and import another group of people for 300 years under the most terrible circumstances, and yet all of them are religious. I'm unaware of any great movement in America by Christians to free slaves. I don't believe it happened. And I know that the people who did it, who were slave traders, were essentially those countries in Europe that were primarily Catholic, that was notably Spain and Portugal, that had very good ways of navigating the world. They were very sophisticated seafarers. They had ships. They understood navigation. The English were in the game too. The French were in the game. The Dutch were in the game. To the credit of the English, they got out of the game. But the fact is that other people didn't. But I think that you have to look at the role of religion. I think that Christianity said that blacks were basically cursed people. There is a thing in the Bible which is called the curse of Ham, in which Noah allegedly cursed his 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham in Arabic means dark. I think Christianity justified enslaving people on the grounds that they were part of the cursed dark race, and therefore it didn't matter.
And it's funny you said that. Yes, true. And it was Ham, Hamitic, and then you had Shem, which is the Shemites, and they were dark people too. And then you had Japheth, which would be your Asians and different people as well. And then when you talk about slavery, you're looking at Deuteronomy 28, because it talks about coming over in slave ships and things of that nature. Because if you really look at it, it is a fight that we still fight today, which is, like you said, racism.
Well, I do think that people should stop following books, that those books got people throughout history to do things like slavery. Religion is the only area that I know of in life where it could take really fundamentally good people and make them do terribly evil things thinking they're doing good. And I'm against it. So that's my view on it. That's on a light subject. I'll probably get that people don't like to hear these things, but I'm a guy who's like, will always speak his mind on these things, and they're very heavy, I know, but I think we should maybe face heavy, because then it will make us lighter.
Well, the most important thing too, because we all have our views and how we receive things, and the most important that you said in the beginning is about morals. Where are the morals of the world? And there has to be a reason for this thing, right? For the people not to have certain morals and doing certain things right now. So where do they find those morals? Because, like, for instance, we have the laws. Like you said, gravity is a law. It's a fact. If I don't put my seatbelt on, if I run a red light, that is a law that I have to keep. If I don't keep that law, it's consequences. So this world here, of course, has laws and things of that nature. As far as the religion has its laws, or what do we say, the Bible as we speak of has laws. And if we don't keep them, there's judgment on them. How is it that people can really look, how do we take care of the laws and do those things of the world and get from getting ourselves back into morals? Because that's really what is important. I think that's what your philosophy is.
I think that, well, few things on that. One is one of the great intellectual quests about life has been, what's the purpose, what's the meaning, and why are we here, and how we should behave. I think that there isn't any purpose of why we're here. I don't think there's anything out there. I don't think there's anybody looking after us, and I think it's a totally cold universe. However, I think that what you do under those circumstances is that you live in reality and you create your own meaning. I don't think a meaning is given to you. And how do we create meaning? I think that in general, scientists would say that our morals, our history and values tend to be based on the fact that we came from very, very tiny little communities of 200 people, 1,000 people, 500 people, 20 people, and it was not and you gradually develop your habits, your morals, your values out of essentially what works as cooperation between people in a small tribe. It's probably not in your best interest to kill your people you're working with. It's probably best not to rape, people around you or the daughter of your next door neighbor. It's probably not a good idea to steal from somebody. I think a lot of what we call our morals and values really come from social behavior that becomes just natural in the interest of the cooperation of the tribe, just like we watch on wonderful nature programs like David Attenborough does, in which that's what he talks about all the time, about how animals cooperate. They cooperate in hunting and gathering. I think we're also just animals. We have more sophisticated forms of cooperating than others, but that's essentially, I think, how you get there. Is essentially most of our things are natural to us, but they're not there because they're values that there is a right or wrong. It's quite possible that there is no right or wrong. Mm-hmm. But what becomes, if you like, right or wrong is purely what the tribe deems in its interest, in its best interest of what works for you. So, and I think there's certain universal things that we all tend to accept regarding murder and theft and how you treat people around you. But I think that those things are basically in the area of a naturalist and a biologist and an anthropologist, and not really shouldn't be in the areas of people who just come along and impose what they say is the truth on you based on some mystical belief in something for which we have no evidence, who's going to do terrible things to us if we don't do something. I don't get it. I don't believe morals come from that. I think it's actually a bad way to get your morals.
Well, it's funny because people here today, like you said, it's all about our choices, and you've lived a very successful life and done a lot of great things that you're proud to, have done. And the things, it's a lot of things that we don't see. I'm sure you didn't know that you were going to be where you are today when you were at a younger age. So a lot of things we do walk by faith and understand, guess what? You know what? Now you have a great thing that you're doing with your art. You wasn't doing that when you first came to America.
Well, that takes me onto it takes us down a different track, but it's a good one to go down, because I think that what everybody should have is a philosophy of life. Now, what is a philosophy of life? It's really a way of seeing the world based on a certain understanding of the world and history and literature and art and other people's lives, by which you can have a sort of a compass and an anchor by which you can navigate everything that goes on around you every day of the week. You have some fixed points at which you've developed a view about the world. So I think one of the great problems in America is that most people don't seem to have that. And you can only have it if you're a nation that does value reading about other people's lives and history and learning from it. And learning how other people thought, what things worked, what things didn't work. And really, gradually, everybody will have a different outlook at the end of the day. Everybody will have a different philosophy. There's no one universal philosophy, I don't think. But I think that everybody should be engaged in the task of trying to get a philosophy of life, and they can't have it without knowledge. So, the amount of that comes back to how you spend your time. If I was to say that, if we frivolously are just watching, excessively American Idol or excessively watching basketball, what good is that going to do to you? It's going to waste your time, and it's not going to give you anything. It's going to make other people rich, and I think it doesn't enrich you. I'm into enriching oneself, rather than spending one's time having, if you like, what you think is fun, watching other people's lives. I think people will get more fun out of their own lives if they watch their own lives better.
That's a good idea.
I mean, I try to do that. I may sound very, you know, a real square, and I may sound like a party pooper, but I mean, I'm a serious guy. And all the work I did, I've come to the conclusion that, at least in my work, the fact that I was lucky enough to grow up in London, which is an amazing cultural city. It's got everything in it. You know, we have, coming back again to about America, a new country. You know, we don't have that. We had a country where we've had this system of thinking, facing all sorts of crises in a small island nation since the Romans invaded us in 55 BC. So we faced the heroic people who fought against the Romans, and then we were invaded by the Danes and the Vikings, and then we had William the Conqueror, the French who did it, and then we had the Armada. No, the Persians never came to us, I don't think, but the Spanish Armada, so we had to defend our country, and then you had Napoleon, and then you had Hitler. The point is that all the time you grow up in England, you're thinking about values. You're thinking about an island nation, you're proud of it, you're proud of what you fought for, and you learn from all these people in history who faced all these great things. So you grow up in your mind with that. Now, America doesn't actually have that. You sort of got a mucky history of, you know, that's not that much to draw on, in my opinion. That's as elevating as some of the other cultures around the world. And I think that if people spend a bit more time on looking at some of those other cultures, I think it would be a good thing. Because there's not enough to draw on in this country.
Really?
I don't think so. I think world literature, world music, you know, some things are universal. Mozart is universal. Mozart's going to outlast Drake. Okay? You know, some things you've got to spend some time on and have a balance. There's nothing wrong with... I'm a guy who's... And many cultures around the world are into balance and yin and yang, and I think this is a country, again, that doesn't have a balance. It doesn't spend enough time on learning and listening to things that perhaps are better for you and will give you more treasures to store up than other things. It's just choices.
Just choices, and like you said, good, better, positive, and see, this is what is really important, because we have to see, like you said, if there's no good and bad, you're saying, like, I think it is just, it doesn't have to be that way. But really, when you look at life, in order for people to have morals, they have to make good choices. So if it was where you can do anything, as we know, there is two sides. There is people who have morals that is doing the right thing. Like you said, you can love unconditionally because you choose to do that. When you have a person over here that their heart is not to do that and can be very harmful to the world. So we have to understand that there are two sides. It can't just be you do whatever you want to, and it was created from the beginning.
But I'll come back to religion. I mean, I would take a philosophical point that happens to come from Christianity. I think it's a lousy idea to say love everybody. It sounds terrific. So on the surface you'd think, why wouldn't you want to love everybody? But here's the problem, is the human animal. I think it's interesting, in the Old Testament it says love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love everybody. It could have said love everybody. Why doesn't it? Interesting point. Maybe if you love everybody, then you actually won't do anything for anybody, because maybe we have to learn what they call empathy. You actually have to learn to love somebody close to you, whether it's a child or a friend or a neighbor, in order to develop that capacity for loving. If you start off with a blank check and say, I love everybody, I think you'll end up loving nobody. It's very grandiose stuff that to me is silly.
I think when it means like love to me is I'm love. So I exude love wherever I am, okay? When it means love my enemies, meaning that if you do something to harm me or hurt me, you know, I don't have any bitterness. I don't harbor any hate for you, because I don't give you the power to make me hate you or do anything ill to you, because I am love. I'm just the action of love.
But I would counter that by saying, well, there's a lot about that I like, but I would also suggest to you that hate is, I think, has a bad name as a word. I think that it's unfairly as a bad name. In Judaism it says, those that love good hate evil. We don't think that it's a good idea to love your enemy, or resist not evil, or turn the other cheek, We think that there is an evil out in the world and it should be confronted, and that we'd have a better world if we did that. And I probably therefore think that, you know, we have to pick words very carefully. To say that hate is a terrible word under all circumstances, I'm not so sure that it is. I would suggest to you that love is a terrible word under certain circumstances. I would suggest to you that there is a very famous movie, The Man in the Glass Booth, which I love very much, which was about the Holocaust. Very great acting performance, Maximilian Schell. It's a classic film in which he argues as a Nazi colonel in the witness box that in fact everything the Germans did, they did out of love and not out of hate. Because they all looked up to Hitler as the father figure that they didn't have in their lives. They were a lost nation. They lost the First World War. They felt worried economically. And they turned to this man who gave them all the answers. And therefore, that's the conclusion in the movie, is that it's much more dangerous to do things out of love sometimes than hate.
Well, look, just like you said, well, let's go back to what you said earlier about the Old Testament, because you're saying that God said he hated this, he hated that, and like you said, sometimes hate, where does hate come from? Where does hate come from? I believe it comes from opposing something that opposes you. If someone comes and disrespects you or dishonors you and treats you badly, you know what I'm saying? Not that you have to be bitter, but I mean, even God said he hated Esau, meaning that he hated something because it was against his principles or against what he believed in and what he trusted in. So just like you're saying, hate may not be a bad thing.
Well, as you know, as I say, I don't believe, you know, any of the stories, and I don't believe there's a God. But I would say something that wakes me up sometimes. You know, I think about in America, that I've noticed, particularly in the black community, that there's a difference between what I've seen outside the black community that comes from something very interesting, which is that people seem to think that it's terribly important how people see you. So it's a very big deal to people, and it manifests itself in expressions like respecting, dissing, fronting, player hating. I've heard all of these before. I find that a bit odd. I find that a bit worrying, because I think that if you really think like that, and you worry all the time about how people see you, then all the time it may explain why people overreact and too quickly, because they actually care about perhaps things that maybe are not that important after all. I think if people could get away with worrying about how other people think and how they think that they're looking at them or talking to them, it'd be better. People would calm down a bit. I think we're a bit overheated about worrying all the time about. I think it's a bad habit that some people have got into, where they actually think it's important.
Right. I like what you said earlier. It's time for us to be. You know, you don't even have to say what you are. I can sit with you and see what's inside of you, or what kind of person you are.
But to have that, you know, it's not enough just in itself. You have to have, I think, character. You know, character is something that embraces. As I say, it's like an anchor, a value system, and character, values, morals. They don't come in a vacuum. And I think that it requires study, and it requires being much more open to history and literature. And I think that you're impoverished when you don't expose yourself enough to that. So I think that, you know, that's where I come back again to the problem of balance in America. It's all right to know, to be incredibly expert at something that, you know, but you should know some more. You know, you may be wonderful at whatever it is, basketball or rapping or playing football or something, whatever things that people may think are things to aspire to. But at the same time, I think that that's all fine. I got no problem with it, as long as you balance yourself with having a great deal of knowledge about the things that I think are more timeless and more important for you.
Now, how do they get that knowledge? I mean, because like, you know, everything is written in the book. Scientists, all that scientific information comes from a book. The biblical side comes from a book. Anything that you read as you grew up in childhood comes from a book.
It's a very good question, but my response to it would be, because there's no one monolithic answer about what anybody should be, nor do I tell them what they should be, but I would say this. Let's give an example. A mass of our society now has in their hands iPads, tablets, telephones. These are things that are absolute miracles that in history one never dreamed that such things were possible. So you could sit there with your iPad, and when I look at an iPad, I feel this little thing has the entire body of knowledge of the world inside it. And you have that choice and that ability to go in any direction you want. You want to go and look for the rubbish, you'll find the rubbish. You want to go and look for elevated people and elevated thoughts and elevated cultures and literature and music and blah, blah, blah. It's all there. And I think that we don't make those choices, but they're there for us. That it's now within the hands of people, I don't want to say everybody, but a very large percentage of the population to decide. It's almost like a video game. Which way do you want to go into the forest? You want to go that way, which is probably not going to be good for you. You want to go that way, that might be better for you. But it's in the power is in our hands. The power to go looking, I don't want to say for truth, and I don't want to even say morals or values, but you can't make educated decisions without knowing other people's lives and what other people have faced in history, in every culture, in every generation, and how other people have responded to all sorts of circumstances that you face. I don't think people's lives, are that different. We all want more or less the same basic things. But I think we can only learn to have a life where you can really handle the life around you when you have a philosophy based on an understanding of how other people have faced things throughout history. There has to be more. I'm just asking for things to be a little bit more expanded from perhaps how we navigate our choices right now. I'm all for more choices. Had I not, am I as a photographer, I was coming back again to talking about growing up in London. I've been lucky enough that I grew up in an environment that was very rich culturally, very rich history. I'm also Jewish, so I'm aware of religion from the point of view of a Jew, and Jewish things, and Jewish suffering, and Jewish success, and that's another perspective. But the fact is that those people who haven't had a strong cultural background, they're at a disadvantage because they've got less to draw on. It helped all my work that I knew, a lot of cultural things that I could decide, okay, well, I want to aspire to recreating that, and I want to do it in a way that you haven't seen. So a lot of my work is pretty elevated stuff because it just it draws from a knowledge of things that are considered to be iconic. And iconic in terms of, historical things, I've shot ballet dancers and geishas and harlequins and, musical instruments and flamenco dancers and whatever, each of the times you're drawing from something from another part of the world that has something rich in history that you can explore and enrich yourself by knowing about. I'm just for people to, wanting people to enrich themselves.
Because we're all connected somewhere or another.
Of course we are.
So that's what makes it beautiful. It's just like a garden, we all have different cultures, different ways that we come, different places that we come from. So just being that balance of coming together and bringing that together and know how to embrace it.
But I think we have to perhaps also face things that are just uncomfortable. We have to put away things that maybe are really silly. Like if you believe, for example, that the next world's more important than this, why bother to make this world better? Why not pollute? Why not destroy the environment? Now, I think that a great deal of what goes on in the world around us is because people don't have a reason not to. Because maybe they believe it isn't important. So you have to decide, we have to have, these things don't happen by accident. Certain people don't do certain things. I'm interested in perhaps following those people who I think have behaved better collectively for a long period of time. I think you can only track things if you look at a track record. I'm not impressed by rhetoric. I'm not impressed by, what every religion talks about love. So obviously I'm not impressed. It's not enough. I'm interested in what has actually happened. And if that religion in its name has harmed people, then it's worth nothing.
In everything, you have things that harm people, and then you have that same thing that help people. That's in everything that you see. So.
Well, obviously, I tend to believe that the harm outweighs the good, and that we have to look outside of those sources for our morals and values and teachings. I think you can find just as good morals in Shakespeare as you can in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, me, I too believe too, like it comes from the heart. The heart of me. And like you said, your heart makes the choices of what you're going to do.
No, your heart makes no choices whatsoever. Your heart is no more significant in your life than your toe. It is it's your brain that decides and sees everything. For example, as a photographer, there's a cliche that it's all in your eye. No, it isn't in your eye. Your eye is no more important than your heart. It's your brain is the one that has all the information and makes all the choices for you. Your heart's just an organ that pumps blood just as much as other organs do all sorts of things. So I actually find that word heart a bit odd. Now, may I give you a practical example? I would say that the Jews give more out of proportion to charity than probably anybody. Okay, but we don't actually have in Hebrew a word that means charity. The word charity derives, I think, from Greek, from caritas. So in French, you have le cœur is the heart, and in Spanish, it's corazón. And people think it's terribly important that charity should come from your heart. Well, Jews actually don't think like that. We have an equivalent word, if you like, for charity, which we call tzedakah, which actually means righteousness, justice, and obligation. So we are really not very interested in the heart. We think that if you rely on the heart, things are not going to happen. But if you say this is the thing that you should do, that is the thing I'm more interested in. I don't care about your motivation. I care what you've actually done. So I've observed in my life that people who lead on from their heart do far less than actually those people who think this is absolutely the right thing to do. As something that they've learned as to, that comes from a different place. I think that I've watched that, literally in charitable giving, that if it's based on your heart, that people just don't give enough. If it's based on, they say, no, this is an obligation that you must do, then more tends to be given.
So say you remember how you told me you moved out here, because I definitely want to talk, because I know we
have fun already.
Because this beautiful home that you have, but it was something in your heart, and what I'm trying to get to
is about right.
No, it had to come from somewhere, because it's love, but the heart, it's really of course it's the organ, but even it speaks in the Bible, it talks about the heart, out of the heart the mouth speaketh, okay? So, and of course the brain,
well, you see, that just proves in the Bible they didn't know anything about science. Which of course they didn't.
Well, you have the mind, you have the soul, and you have the spirit. Guess what? It's when your brain dies and the spirit, and this body right here, right? What's left?
Who knows?
What's left here?
Probably nothing.
Nothing, right?
But look, you want to do good, I want to do good, and it's a great quest of life for everybody to decide what they want to do. And those people, you want to first of all gravitate to those people. They may not be the coolest, and they may not be the prettiest, and they may not be the most successful, but you want to try and hang with good people.
Right.
That's the first thing to do. Surround yourself with people and keep away from people who may be sexy and fun and attractive and go to all the right parties and go to the right places, but offer you nothing in terms of that which is probably the most important thing, which is, who am I? What do I actually stand for, And I think a lot of people do get attracted like flies, wasps to honey, by seductive things that are really bad for them, because they want to fit in. But I think the trick is to be strong enough to resist and hang with people who really stand for good. And by the way, goodness is not the absence of evil. It's the active pursuit of good. I'm not impressed with people who say I'm a good person. I want to know what that I'm not an evil person. It's what you actually actively do. And you have to judge people on a track record, not by what they say.
No, I really want to get in the nitty-gritty with you about that too. I know, but we stayed on religion for a while, and also, the good.
We can talk about anything else. Happily talk about sex. Happily talk about politics. Whatever you like.
So I love it.
It's all important. They're not small things. I think people avoid these subjects because they think they're taboo and they're uncomfortable, and they say this is the wrong thing and you shouldn't talk about. No, I think it's the one thing you should talk about. I think that the 3 areas I feel you shouldn't talk about are the 3 areas you should talk about.
Right.
Politics, religion, and sex. I think these are important things.
I do too.
And that we shouldn't avoid them on the grounds that are uncomfortable.
I agree. And I'm glad we were able to talk about this And truly, I know that, like you said, you have your own vision and thoughts about that. But the main thing we do agree on is that morals and what the world is, what's going on in the world today. And it's because of what those morals are and what's on.
Well, it's very troubling because, again, you know, as I say, part of the history of America is if you've started off badly, I think it's troublesome because I think it's still with us in our national psyche. But the fact is, looking at the country, yeah, I think lots of things that are accepted are not acceptable. I think we've given in to far too many things that we say are a given, that are not a given, that it is not necessary in any society that all sorts of things that go on around us that are negative should be happening or are acceptable or are incapable of solutions. I mean, and they range all over the place, and I'm just fascinated by them. I mean, you know, let's talk Chicago for a second. You know, the amount of murders a year of innocent people in a nation like this, it's supposed to be, you know, has even for the people who are the most poor, has far more than most other countries, for example, in Africa, that have nothing. Yeah. It's not a given that, for example, the poverty causes crime. It's not a given. It doesn't help, but it's not a given. There's lots of people nations that have nothing, but they behave better than we do. Right. And we were a nation in which, you know, 1 in 5 children goes to school armed with a weapon. You know, metal detectors in schools. I mean, things that nowadays, by dropping, by the way, on the values used to be taught in the American school system. So if you ask teachers about 35 years ago, which they did, what's the most worrying thing for you in the school, in your daily life? What's the biggest problem? It would be chewing gum and talking in class. Now you're dealing with guns and knives in the classroom.
Totally different.
And that is what happens in a society when we drop that from the school and we said everything's relative. It's a known thing. It's called moral relativism. The idea that who's to say that anything's better than anything else. I think that some things are better than other things. Mm-hmm. But, and one should proudly say that.
Right.
And some people do, and it needs to be said that not everything can be judged by the grounds of leaving children to explore this all for themselves.
Yes, and you know what? I definitely wanted to get to that, and we have a lot to talk about. I would say this is episode 1 because I see you have a lot of.
I don't think anybody will want me back after this.
Oh, yes.
I'll be banned from Facebook.
No, you know, because
I'll have to move to Moscow.
It should never be easy, you know, and it's all of us have different opinions, different thoughts, different things that we believe, and it's important, and there's nothing wrong with you believing something different than I do. It's the point that we can sit down and talk about our difference and still love each other when we get up, even though you don't believe in maybe loving everybody. And of course, we don't, you know, there's things that you would hate. I mean, even God himself do not like certain things. You don't like certain things when someone does certain things to you or disrespect you. But at the end of the day, we're all not alike, and we all have differences.
Well, I come from a country where we had the Beatles, and they had a great song, All You Need Is Love. So, you know, it's all true. I agree, we agree on that.
Yes.
You know, but I mean, and it's just ways of getting there. But as I say, I think that a lot of our thinking since we were children, primarily coming from religion, I think, has told us things that I don't believe in anymore, but are actually bad for us.
Yeah, I agree.
No, you don't agree, but you're too nice.
Yes,
but we want the same thing.
Yes, and that is to transform this world. It's about a love movement, and I agree. This is what I believe.
No, I'm down for that. I'll join that.
That love, unconditional love is the only thing that can transform lives, because we all have something that we've been through. We all have really dealt with some evil things in our lives, and dealing with things that we see right now as far as the government is concerned, as far as us, you know, the slavery things. And let me tell you, that has not stopped. And truly, what I do know from scientists versus religion, that a lot of things and everything that they took, and I can show you, and that's why I would love to have you come back, where it was already derived, even from the flat and the circle of the earth was in Job. And I can tell you the man who actually took that out, and there's certain things that they took out, and now they say, oh, it's science right now. So that'd be another subject. I would love to get in the nitty gritty with you.
Absolutely.
And
well, I feel very guilty to be so opinionated. I should have just relaxed and talked about lovely Hollywood and the weather's nice and the people are great.
I want to hear your
fun to shoot.
You know, because there's people out there that believe just like you believe. You know, and there's people that believe like I believe. Like I said, it's important because we can sit and talk about it. Like you said, it should be talked about.
Yeah.
You know why people can't talk about it and they don't want to? Because by the time they get up, they're turning red and pissed off. And they don't like each other no more. But if we can sit and talk about it and let them see the views of that so people can see the choices, and then we can get up and make some kind of difference in each other's lives, because I might show you something, you might show me something. Because a lot of times in those opposing things, is really some truth there. And the reason why we don't want to go there, because we're afraid, you know, and fear has nothing to do with love. So I am so grateful that you have taken this time out to
thank you. It's been great. I feel very guilty as a badly behaved guest.
No, you're an excellent guest.
Best to speak your mind than not. You know,
I love it. I love it. And thank you for speaking your mind.
Just keeping it real. How about that?
We're keeping it real here on Rock Life with Zion. I am so grateful for my friend here, Richard Franklin, to come on and rock with Zion and tell how he feels in his truth. And like I said, everyone, we should be truthful about what we feel and believe, and be able to sit with each other unconditionally and love each other no matter what that difference is, and let the truth, that real truth, come and reign in our own hearts, so that our lives can be transformed into something even greater. Again, thank you for rocking with Zion. It's been a pleasure to have you here, my special guest. I love it. He has to come back. I really hope to do some great things, because you only heard a little bit of what he's done. He has some great things that he's done. We haven't got a chance to talk about. I'm just going to leave that right there. I'm not even going to say, because I'm going to leave that for next time.
Well, look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for rocking with Zion. And it's been real. And have a good night. All right.